AI will change society, the church and the world to the same extent that the internet has done, but much quicker. Something is coming technologically to the church. It's already here with the youth. It's not AI that will damage humanity. It's people with AI.
So how does it impact the Christian space?
That's pastors. If we can learn to use AI to save time, then I hope we are more available. We should be. That should be a benefit of AI. But we have to get our act together to do that.
Is incredible. Hello and welcome to today's podcast, Together with God TV. I'm joined by a new friend, Chris Goswami. Chris, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Ian. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm excited about today's conversation.
Yeah, me too.
I hope all of you will be too. We are going to explore AI, artificial intelligence, and what does that mean to the church and to you and I? Well, Chris, I have no idea, but apparently we're giving you all the accolades as the man that is going to tell us.
I hope I don't disappoint.
Yeah. But actually, more than that, Chris, we always say on this podcast it's important that when we take information, whether that's a preach or, ideas about tech or the future, that it's really important that we understand who we're getting that data from. So I'd really like, if that's okay, to get to know a little bit about who Chris is and, what your testimony is like. How did you meet Jesus?
Yeah. Okay, well, I was brought up in an immigrant family. My parents came here sort of around 1960. I was born here soon after that. And my dad was a Hindu priest. So we were brought up as a part of the Hindu religion, commonly going to temples. And my mum and dad formed a kind of Indian organisation in Lancashire, which was in that day was the first one. We used to meet together to celebrate Indian festivals, Republic Day, and all that kind of thing. So we were brought up as Hindus, and then in my teens, I went to university, late teens. Still as a kind of secular Hindu, not really believing anything. I always thought there was a God, because that seems more natural to me and more logical. But I didn't know who it was. I remember being at school in an assembly, and the head would often use this phrase. He'd tell a great story about somebody who'd done something, some missionary or some kind person. And he'd always end by saying that was a very Christian thing to do.
Right.
And I'd always get quite cross and think, well, why is that not a very good Islamic thing to do?
Right.
Why is it not a very good Hindu thing to do? What's so special? Anyway, I went to university, landed up with some Christian friends, or a group of friends who happened to be Christian, who kind of took me in, as it were, and used to take me along. But obviously, over several months and 1 or 2 years, were trying to evangelize me. So they take me along, which I thought was great, because you got along to evenings, coffee, cakes, nice girls. I mean, what's not to like? And some really poor arguments about this God that they called Jesus,
Right.
which I really enjoyed poking holes in, because they take me along to these events. I remember they took me along to one, a Christian lawyer, and my friend came up at the end, Andy, and he said, "What do you think of that, Chris?" I said, "I'm so glad you invited me, Andy, because now I know this Christianity is a load of rubbish." And we went into why. But what I couldn't doubt, Ian, was their concern, their love and their friendship for me, which is something I couldn't poke holes in.
Right.
There was something about them, never mind what they said or articulated or discussed, just them themselves. They were different. And that was obvious to me. A couple of years went by. We just carried on in this way, really. I even tried to go into church a few times. And then one of my friends said, Chris, because I always had this problem with Christianity, which was what Christians called grace, which to me was the astonishing unfairness, the kind of barbaric idea of Christianity, that somebody else takes the blame for me, and that's okay. Somehow that's fair, that's right. And that I couldn't get my head around that. If you think about it, I don't know, there's this idea in Hinduism called karma, which is, the universe makes itself right.
Right.
You get what you deserve in the end. You get what you deserve. And that's fair. That's reasonable. That's kind of right, actually, in many ways. So this idea that this other person called Jesus should die for all the awful things that other people had done that I'd done was a complete anathema to me. It was just I couldn't seemed wrong. I remember my friend saying then, it was in my room at the Hall of Residence. He said, "Chris, you can spend all your time arguing about the unfairness of the cross. It is unfair. It's really unfair. Or you can just accept that this guy loved you enough to do that, right?" And I thought, well, what I'll do, let's try an experiment, and I'll try this prayer that my friend's saying, and I'll try going to church. If there's nothing in it after 6 months, I'll know. This is 40 years ago, but anyway, I started this experiment, a bit of a cheek, really. Just have prayed the prayer. If there's something in it, and you're really God, do something. Went along to church. That went on for about a year, and I was very idle about it. Went along to church when I felt like it. Well, not often. Almost never opened the Bible. I'm just kind of waiting for something to happen, almost as it were. And then the minister of the church I was at, which was a C of E, one day we were chatting, and he realised I hadn't been baptised. And he said to me, "You should be baptised." And for me, this was like the craziest thing that anybody could ever suggest, because to me, that's what British people did to babies.
Right. What does your mum and dad think at this point?
My mum and dad are split up at this point.
Okay.
My dad is quite kind of upset,
right?
Because I used to go and visit him at his house in Edinburgh, and he'd have a little shrine with Ganesh and Krishna, and then along at the end was a little Jesus, holding with a kind of Catholic Jesus with a little lamb and a crook, And he would say to me, because we would talk, "I've accepted your Jesus. Why can't you just accept my gods?"
Right. It's quite a Hindu thing to do, isn't it? To have many gods. So just adding Jesus.
Yes.
That's a big problem in India, isn't it? Is people accept Jesus but keep the rest.
It can be.
Yeah.
It can be. It can be easy to move from one idol to another idol.
Right.
Nevertheless, there are millions of Indians at the outcast level who've taken on Jesus.
Yeah.
Because this idea of somebody who we're not untouchable anymore.
Right.
Not only will this man touch us, he loves. That's completely new. Yeah. So that's another story. So that's what my dad would have said at the time.
What was your dad's name?
Sorry.
What was your dad's name?
Bhagwan.
Bhagwan.
Yes, died some years ago. So zipping back then, so David, this minister, said, you should be baptised. And I thought, well, that's just completely mad. What are you going to do? You're going to put me in a white gown and put my head in a trifle bowl or something. Anyway, he showed me in the Bible where this was, and he kind of said, because he knew I was a bit kind of, the best lukewarm.
Right.
He said, if you want to be a Christian, do what it says to be a Christian. And if you don't.
Right.
So I thought, almost as part of the experiment, okay, let's do that then.
Right. And did anything happen? Like,
what
was your moment of, I'm all in, so to speak?
So, it was a baptism one evening in Whalley Range Moss Side in Manchester, in an evening service, just water poured onto me. And within, I would say, days or weeks, I felt quite different.
Wow.
I didn't know about baptism of the Holy Spirit or anything like that. And I actually felt very restless. And I ended up, within a few months, applying for jobs all over the world. I applied for teaching jobs in Zambia, in Kenya, and ended up, although I'd never lived there, in working in an engineering college in India, in a very rural part of India that I'd never been to, no family there. And I thought, this isn't a university. It'll be like my uni here. I was so wrong. I got there, they were still building the college.
Yeah, wow.
I was given a room like this, but with nothing in it.
Wow.
And they said, "This is your electronics lab." I said, "Well, there's nothing in it." Well, that's not, that's kind of your problem,
Yeah.
I taught computing, and what I taught the students to write code.
Right.
And then we'd send it by courier to Mumbai University. Somebody there would type it in. Then the next week it would come back, error in line 2.
Oh, wow.
Okay, type it all out again, send it out again. The next week it would come back, error in line 6. That's how we did computing.
Wow.
But basically, it was actually it shook me to my core, that experience. I had no friends, no contacts. I was desperately lonely. And for weeks on end, I was desperately lonely. Until, by some contacts, I came across some missionaries in Mumbai from Canada who put me in touch with a little church. And I thought, I want to try that because I feel so lonely. This place, it was in hundreds of square miles. There were Hindu temples, Jain temples, but no church, nothing there. And I got on the bus to get to this church, this little Brethren church, and I got there. It's about a 2-hour journey. And they were like, because there was no phone or anything, no email, just turned up on a Sunday. And they were like, surprised. Who's this foreign-looking guy who's come to our church? But they welcomed me in. And actually, they said, why don't you stay for a meal? And then they said, why don't you stay for the day? And then they said, if you want to come here on a Sunday, you're welcome to spend the day with us. And actually, that was my introduction to Christianity. That God had to break me down in order to build me up. And there were so many things in that year. If I could mention a couple.
Yeah, please do.
But I remember God saying to me, because in India, you have to fight to get on a bus. I was on an ordinary Indian salary, couldn't afford a taxi. You literally have to fight to get on a bus. And God said to me very distinctly, when you're in the UK, you couldn't be bothered to walk to the church at the end of your road.
Wow.
Now you can fight to go.
Wow.
And I did. I said, this is worth it. And there were so many incidents. I remember reading in Luke 10, very early on, where Jesus said, and I can't remember the start of it, but he says, if you trust in me, the disciples come back, the 72, I think. And he says, and they're amazed at what they've done, in Jesus' name. And Jesus said, if you trust in me, you will tread on serpents and scorpions, and nothing shall in any way harm you. And I thought, wow, what a verse. You're treading on serpents and scorpions, yeah. A few weeks later, I was in this flat, no running water, no decent toilets to speak of. The water was brown. I was ill a lot during the year. But anyway, I was getting up in the morning, put my slipper on, a scorpion falls out, runs across the floor. And that verse comes back. Right? A couple of weeks later, I was walking to go out to dinner. There was no road from my village to the town for dinner. So we used to walk along a railway track. And it was a monsoon. And lots of things come out in the monsoon in rural India. And I had a torch. You always needed a torch to walk at night, particularly in the monsoon. Not so much to see so that anything can see you, And the battery was almost dead. And I remember thinking, it's not worth taking this little light. But I thought, I'll take it anyway. So I walked along the track with this torch. And I literally saw in the light this great long snake slither off in front of me. And Jesus said, you will have power to tread on serpents and scorpions.
Wow.
And nothing shall in any way harm you.
Wow.
And honestly, I began devouring scripture for hours a day. I would read the Bible for hours a day. It was an Indian college. We didn't start work till 11.
Right.
Sun's up at 5:30, So it was great. And I really got to know the Lord in that year.
Yeah, incredible.
And when I came back, people at that experimental church that I went to occasionally just said, you're completely different. You're just a completely different person.
Right.
And that was the start of my, real walk as a disciple.
Wow. Wow. That God would need to take you all the way to India to reach you is incredible.
Ironically, to where my family was from. The most ironic thing, though, was at Christmas the first year, I travelled north overnight to where I still had family, my mother's family, right? And they actually are Christian. My mother gave up her nominal Christianity when she married a Hindu.
Right.
So they introduced me to all kinds of other churches and Christian traditions and Indian Christian traditions, which were, again, wonderful and new to me.
Wow. It's incredible. India's really close to our heart because we broadcast in India and we have a team in Chennai and Hyderabad.
Right.
I mean, we could just talk about India actually.
There's so much more.
There's so much more. So, Chris, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. I know it's a snippet, but just to hear how you've met God. And
since then I've worked in tech. I've trained as a minister, so I'm now a Baptist minister and a chaplain. So it's up to date.
So my question is, what qualifies you in particular that we should talk to you and actually listen to you about AI?
Okay, so hopefully, first of all, I'm a Christian and a believer. I'm very much up for whatever my faith takes, wherever it takes me. So while I was at uni, I mentioned in India, I was teaching computing.
Yeah.
That was because my degree was electronic engineering. And then I did an MSc and a PhD in telecoms research. And since the late 80s, I've worked in tech for over 30 years. A number of UK and Silicon Valley companies I've worked at. Initially as a software engineer, writing code. And then I worked through different positions, and I retired from that industry, from a Silicon Valley company just last year as VP of communications.
Right.
So I moved over really from tech to communications. And I've always had a massive interest in communications. I've been writing on my blog, 7minutes.net, for 10 years. A lot of that writing, not all of it, has been tech as well, or the overlap between faith and technology.
Right.
And one of the articles I wrote just some months ago, start of this year, I was on artificial intelligence. I wrote it for Christianity Magazine, and they published it. And there was significant interest in that. So a number of people contacted me. One of them, for example, was the CEO of Youthscape, a UK ministry to train Christian youth leaders. And he, Chris Curtis, who's we've now got together within a group that we can talk about. Chris Curtis, I remember him saying to me, Chris, he said to me, what you have to remember is youth is the R&D, the research and development part of the church. That if something is coming technologically to the church, it's already here with the youth, with the kids. So he said to me, what do we do when kids, which is the case, Christian kids would rather talk to an AI bot than to a person, because the AI bot is non-judgmental, always present, always there, anonymous, than a human. And then quite sort of worryingly, even much worse than that, I would say, I remember him saying to me, what do we do when kids can create their own pornographic video using AI, put into that video anybody they want from school, any celebrity? Now, that's not quite there yet, thankfully, but it's not that far away. And he was saying, his head has to go there, because you have to prepare for this.
Right.
So there's enormous good, which we can talk about as well.
Yeah, I guess it'd be really interesting to get into the good and the bad, but just for people at home that might not understand what AI is, artificial intelligence, how would you describe in the most simplest way what AI is?
Well, I'll give you a little definition and a couple of examples so we can understand it.
Thank you.
I think there's two aspects. So it's computer software, basically, that does two things. First of all, it can reason and make decisions and go through logical arguments and make decisions the way we do. And it can learn from experience the way we do. So whereas previously, if you were writing a great chess program, you'd write all the rules and then all the strategies to play chess and all the ideas for playing chess. With AI, you just give it some very basic rules about chess. And then you say to AI, go to YouTube and go and watch some games of chess. Then go and watch some grandmasters and learn how to beat them. So it has this discovery element, and you kind of don't know what it's going to do next. It can go and fulfill things in a way we didn't expect. So that's the first thing. It can learn, it can make decisions the way that humans do, because we learn from copying as well, just like AI does.
Right.
And then the second thing about AI is that it has this mountain of data. So it's ingested or parsed or taken in, read, millions of websites, Wikipedia, news sites, blogs, social media, Bible, sermons, commentaries on the Bible. It's read all this stuff, and it has a model of all this data. Far more than we can have.
So I want to challenge that a little bit in that is AI really intelligent? Because from my understanding of it, looks like it's intelligent because it's making decisions that look similar to what we are doing, but it feels like it's actually just huge statistical analysis. Like if you have enough data, you're going to make better decisions. What is it that actually makes it like intelligence rather than we've had programmatic artificial intelligence forever, which is just making a set of decisions.
Yeah.
It can learn what you do in a day and then give you a calendar to do that. This is like a step change, isn't it? So what's difference in the coding and the algorithm? What is this step change? Because a lot of people will say what I'm saying is, well, it's just huge statistical analysis that looks clever.
I think the big change, probably two things. One was a marketing thing, where OpenAI came out with this thing called ChatGPT last December. But I think the big change isn't so much in the technology itself or the programmatic ability, it's the interface. That suddenly, I wrote an article 3 years ago on AI,
right?
But then you had to be a programmer to use it.
Right.
But the big change is suddenly you can talk to this thing in natural language, in English. Anybody can do it. Not only that, but you don't even have to type anymore.
Right.
AI can sense now, it can see, it can hear, and it can speak English. So under the bonnet, it's not been, I don't think it has been a step change. It's a gradual change, gradual increase. But the change is, I can just talk to this. I don't have to be a programmer or even that smart. You say, hey, like you said, my parents are coming for the weekend. From your knowledge about them and about me, give me some ideas what to do. So you can say, do that in English.
Yeah,
I think that's the biggest change.
Yeah,
what do you think?
Yeah, I think that that's a good way to look at it. I think that one of the step changes that's been made is in its ability to write its own code. So that's where it's artificial intelligence is where it can develop and grow to do new tasks or to do things slightly differently. So there's some areas where it still fails, right? And I don't know if they'll ever get this right, because I think for me, you're talking artificial intelligence is good, but intelligence isn't what makes a human, right? I guess we're sentient, and and that's a question of consciousness. Is the machine really conscious? Will it ever be? Some people say with intelligence comes consciousness, so that's inevitable. Then people like me say, no, because God made us.
Well, you may have seen or not that a very senior Google engineer was fired last year.
Yeah, because he
wrote a blog.
He
said AI has now become sentient.
Right,
it's now conscious.
He wouldn't turn the machine off, would he?
Yes,
and he
correct,
refused because he said it would be like killing a person. But I think perhaps he just spent too long with the AI.
Needs to get out more.
But
the thing is that is true, and we can talk about the Christian aspects of this later. But I would say, you're using words like, is it really intelligent, and does it really understand? But I would say, well, define understanding, define intelligent, because you can certainly define understanding in a way that AI meets.
I think it's the feeling in decision making that I think it can't yet do. So I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example for people at home. So you could quite viably imagine in a few years, if not months, that you could say, pick a famous TV program, any of them, EastEnders, Friends, or whatever. You could say to the AI, watch all of these episodes and create me the next episode. What is the next episode in EastEnders, Coronation Street? They're all English programs for people watching around the world. And it would not only be able to write the script, but it would probably be able to render the background. It would probably be able to take the characters and move them and create a dramatic story. And I've no doubt that if you said create me 40 episodes, 40 episodes for the next episode, and pick the best one. I think the thing it couldn't do is pick the best one, because there's something about human intuition that whenever I use AI or I see something that's been used by AI, I certainly can tell. The guys behind the cameras here use AI, and they'll tell you, Chris, when they've used it. I say, you've used AI for that, haven't you? Because there's something in. Maybe it's too perfect. Maybe we like, we like error and mistake. So for me, it's still doing a clever trick, but I'm not qualified to say will it become sentient? Will it be able to make
Yeah.
its own decisions? You know, will it be able to make a good decision about art and music?
Yeah.
You know, those
I mean,
soft skills.
I mean, I think it's certainly true that when I said AI can teach itself to play chess brilliantly and beat anybody.
Right.
Yeah. But it's also true that AI doesn't care if it wins.
Right.
Doesn't care if it loses. Right. That is true.
Yeah.
That is true. I think I don't really agree with your point though, where you know, could it pick the best episode? Not really. I think that's something we tell ourselves because it's comforting. I think that actually a lot of what we think is intuition, only I could do this, is actually formulaic.
Yeah.
Now, speaking to someone from the BBC, where we were being interviewed on this topic a few weeks ago, and she was saying, you know, a lot of BBC articles that we write, there is actually a formula that we follow. We don't like to think that, but we do things in a certain way, and that can be learnt and can be predicted and can be replicated. So I think that gap is reducing all the time.
I've got another example though of another experiment that they did with AI. So bunch of researchers created an AI to guess sexuality. So were you straight?
Right,
etc.
Okay.
Right? It's really controversial. You've heard about it, right?
I think so, yeah.
And the statistical analysis said that it was 82% able to guess your sexuality and gender, right? Which are two controversial topics at the moment.
Yeah.
Just by a photo of your face, right?
Right.
But I still think it's clever statistics because I could create an AI model that was 100% correct, right?
Yeah.
Because I could just create a model where I just fed it, you know, people that were of one gender, you know, male, and you know, heterosexual, and then, you know, just say guess that, you know, my model would be better with one rule than all these ones.
Yeah, okay.
And it actually turns out that model, what it was doing was picking like controversial things that you wouldn't do ever, like the type of clothes they're wearing or the hat they were wearing, or was it a male face with makeup on it, and making assumptions about what that person's gender was. Right. So again, I just see a piece of clever.
Yeah, but you said yourself, 82% of the time it was right.
Right.
I think you've got a point. There are things that AI isn't good at, and we can talk about those. Nevertheless, I think a lot of what we think we're unique at is you can actually get it down to statistics and formula.
Yeah.
You know, so for example, I think Rishi Sunak a few weeks ago on the
you definitely could replace him with an
AI. Definitely, possibly. But I mean, he was saying that, you know, he'd just come back from Moorfields Hospital, and, you know, AI from a single photograph, talking about single photographs of the back of your eye, can not only diagnose eye problems, but predict your likelihood to get Parkinson's or a stroke, which is fantastic.
Yeah, it's
AI is being used in cancer research and diagnosis. It's improved the diagnosis of breast cancer by 13%, which, if you're in that 13%, is massively important.
Yeah.
So there's loads of good that's going to come out of this. You know, I was hearing a case the other day of just an ordinary person, actually happens to be celiac. I happen to be celiac, gluten-free, you know. And she said she uses AI to say, create me a menu that's gluten-free for this week, and uses seasonal vegetables from the UK at this time of year. Wow. Bang, it did it. Then she said, can you put an Italian spin on it? Bang, it did it. Then she said, can you now create the shopping list for the week? And what it did, it pulled out, for example, you know, the onions from Monday's meal and Friday and Saturday, put them together. This is how many onions you need.
Right.
And we're not that far off from saying, you know, can you now actually put the shopping list in the order that I'll find them in my supermarket?
Right.
You know, so
or just deliver them to the door.
Well,
on a drone.
yeah, you know, it's kind of Deliveroo by AI on a drone. So there's loads of cases. I mean, education's an area where AI. So I was listening, is really helping can really help. I mean, I know we've had lots of stories about kids cheating on homework because you can get AI to do your essay. Definitely, definitely. But the answer to that is not to ban AI, it's to teach kids how to use AI responsibly. So one thing that an American educator was doing, I heard on a podcast, they flipped the education model. So whereas you and I, and probably everyone watching, when we were at school, and still when you're at school, you learn at school and you do your assignments, homework at home, right? Now, what they're saying is, because an AI is so good at tutoring, you can say to AI, explain to me how to do GCSE algebra. Give me some easy examples. Oh, those are too hard. Can you make it easier? It's such a great tutor. What they're now saying is, now you do your learning at home. Here's the engine to use, the AI engine to use. Learn how to do calculus or whatever it is, or algebra or trigonometry. And then tomorrow, when you come to school, where we can see it's you doing it and not AI, do the assignment, which isn't really obvious. But and then what they were saying was, actually, this is a better way of teaching anyway.
Yeah, there's huge benefits to personalisation in anything, in medication, in in education, in how we pick who gets the resources for things like benefits, housing.
Yes.
Everybody's the big problem with any political or governmental decisions is they're made for a broad brushstroke of people.
Yes.
Because it's far too complicated to individually means test and spend time with 68 million people, that are in the UK. But actually with AI, I think the benefits of personalisation, that's what definitely excites me, is that I would get a personal experience that is not only as good as the doctor or as good as the teacher, but actually might be better.
Yes, and quicker and more accessible.
Right.
I mean, another couple of examples. So still on the education, Stanford University are teaching an entrepreneurial course, right? And one of the things they now include in their teaching is what they call the impossible assignment. And in the impossible assignment, they ask you to do something that's impossible for you. So I don't know your background, Ian, but let's say you've never written any code, right? Any computer code. They might say to you, Ian, go and create a software package to edit videos for this studio or to create accounts for this kind of company. And you're like, well, I don't know how to write code. But you know how to write a prompt for AI to say, now write some computer code that does this. And you can then test and qualify what comes out and say, well, does it work? And so what we're doing in education is we're actually moving from problem solving to actually being able to get AI to solve the problem and qualify what comes back, which is a new kind of learning education that we hadn't done before, I mean, and your other example, there are problems. So for example, you talked about benefits and all that kind of thing. So, AI can pick up on human bias. It can create its own bias as well, actually. So, for example, if you had AI used by a benefits office, as you suggested, and it is being used by, I know a social worker uses AI to write reports, the issue there is, or one of the issues is, if AI is learning from humans, right, and let's say as a human, in that benefit office, let's just say, there's somebody there who has a bias against black people, and they're suspicious about them. They think they're out to trick them, to cheat the system, and they tend not to not approve their applications. And you could say, if it was a job, let's say in technology, where most people are male, in a company, people might be more prone to hire males for programmers because they tend to be males. And the problem is AI will pick up on that and then will continue that ad infinitum. That bias gets extrapolated then. So, but then somebody else would argue, but show me a human who's not biased.
Right. And you could code in for that. You could, because you would use more than one person as the...
Hopefully.
As
if we're aware
use
of
case.
That.
And
hopefully,
I think, what do you think the big fears are for AI? Because there seems to me when I look online like a real polarization, and I think the truth is it will sit somewhere in the middle, you know. And the two big things that have kind of challenged me in my thinking is, look, we've been streamlining work for a long time. Like, so, you know, we automated all our factories. We automated the postal system so that a machine sorts it. So we've been using programs and machines for a long time to, you know, change people's jobs, and it gets rid of them. It's not till we get to the middle class jobs that start to get replaced, like lawyers. I mean, if the law is just a set of rules, then an AI can certainly learn to give you the correct advice for your situation. Given that if you can describe it correctly, it might even be able to help you describe it eventually. So there's this like democratization of what might have been difficult resources for people on lower incomes or people with lower education levels to access easily. So then there's like strikes from the writers. You know, it's and all this kind of stuff. So that's one side of it. That's like there's a pushback against, like, you know, it's going to take all the jobs away, which I think I've heard before with other technologies. I think it will just change people's jobs. And then there's the other part, which is AI is going to take over the world. You know, it's going to plug itself into the nuclear weapons and set them off and kill us, because it will recognise us as the parasites because of the eco-climate narrative that's on the web. It'll read all that and go, well, I know what the problem is, and it'll get rid of us. Like, what's the reality of that?
Well, gosh, there's a lot of few things you brought up there. So one or two, you talked about, you know, jobs and work and white collar, you know, middle class. So just out of interest, I saw a stat a couple of weeks ago that said, from actually the Centre for the Study of Existential Threats, right, which we can talk about later, that there is a centre for the study of existential threats. But they said there is more money, there is more research now going into AI than all other science and technology put together, which is incredible. You think about the money that's going into the study of climate change, of space research, you know, of medicine, of the physical world, of all that and all other sciences and engineering put together. There's more money going into AI research than all that put together, which is astonishing, isn't it? So this thing is moving at a breakneck speed. One of the issues is it's moving faster than our ability to regulate it. But in terms of jobs, so you know, I know there's a lawyer in my church and they banned it from their company, but I don't think that's for very long, because, you know, you can't stop it at the end of the day.
Well, there's going to be the Uber of legal services. There has to be. I mean, I'm trademarking it. The Uber of legal services.
There you go.
You know,
get in there.
You know, if you can develop the AI that will deliver the service,
deliver
and you
the
can
contract.
charge 50 quid, you know, and have mass usage, all of a sudden you've got something that's more practical, it's easy accessible, it's affordable.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, there are, I think, there are types of jobs which I don't think can ever be replaced by AI. And interestingly, they're not necessarily the kind of middle-class kind of jobs. So, for example, plumbers, electricians, construction workers, anything where you need your hands, physiotherapists, you know, I don't see as being replaced by AI, probably ever. Similarly, jobs where we have an emotional connection with the person we're talking to, which could be medicine, you know, are very unlikely to be completely replaced by AI. So there are all sorts of jobs that won't be replaced. But when it comes to replacement, we have to remember, you know, for example, and Rishi Sunak used these examples.
Maybe not for us. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go for it.
You said at the beginning, and I know this is true because my friend's daughter showed me this, and she does this. She talks to a bot. So she talks to a bot on TikTok. And I said, oh, can you send me, you know, the information? I'd love to see it. That'd be really interesting. And she's like, oh, no. Uncle Ian. She calls me Uncle Ian. That's far too private. Because she's going to get sort of, I guess, a kind of therapy from this TikTok bot, which I found bizarre, frightening. Guess I didn't understand it. But when she gets older, she might find it completely normal to speak to a bot. Like, she's not going to be bothered the same way you and I are about that interpersonal.
No. And it's this thing, you know, about loneliness and counselling, which actually, sadly, you can get from bots more easily than humans. There's there's an episode of The Simpsons, right, which I watched, where one of the characters, I think it's Nelson, one of the side characters, is in this online world on his screen constantly, and he loves it and he's enjoying it. And somebody says, "Why do you spend so much time with that? It's just an illusion. It's all an illusion." And his reply, "Some of us prefer illusion to despair." Which is sad, isn't it? Some of us prefer illusion to having no one to talk to. But I mean, that is something we have to grapple with as Christians and as the church.
Right.
But just to come back to your previous point on jobs, to finish that. So, if you go back to the Industrial Revolution, people's jobs were taken away, but millions more jobs were created. Or even more recently, the advent of electricity. People who made oil lamps, etc., were all put out of business. But you think about the number of jobs that have been created, which we could never have imagined when electricity came about 100 years ago. You could never have imagined. Okay, so there's the production of electricity, but think about all the domestic appliances that are out there now.
Yeah.
You could not have foreseen those jobs. So there will be many, many new jobs created by this. We have to be adaptable, and thankfully that's one thing as humans we're good at, actually, is adapting and changing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I wonder as well, because I think the nature of what you have to do changes. So I think the level of the issue moves up or down depending on what you're looking at. So an example would be making dinner. I guess 100 years ago, you'd have had to trade something with a farmer, probably do all the prep, make it, and now all you have to do is really make the decision about what you want. If you're in a privileged position, go to the supermarket, buy and do some minimal prep, and even buy something that's ready-made. So now I have like decision fatigue. I've moved the issue from getting the resource, having the skills to make it. I now like, well, what do I eat? Like your friend with that list for the week. So I wonder how that issue moves up with AI, like what then becomes a challenge. Maybe we discuss the nature of relationship or how we do dinner, which wouldn't that be a lovely thing? If we actually said, let's put, like we should discuss sitting down and, not having the telly on and, I saw something the other week that really hit for me. It said, if you're spending more time looking at your screen than you are into somebody's eyes, you're doing life wrong. Right. So I've started to spend more time looking in people's eyes. What a difference it's made.
What a difference it's made. And I mean, people say, will this thing really take off, this thing called AI, and, add it to virtual reality and headsets? Will we really be doing that? But the same people 20 years ago, 25 years ago, would never have predicted that we'd all be walking around like this.
I know. I remember when it was literally rude. So when I grew up, these were the two rules. Don't take photos of yourself because it's vain, right? Selfies were like...
Oh, yeah.
My
Who does that?
grandma would have given me a slap for looking in the mirror too long, right? So you go from that to now where it's almost the obligatory selfie. Otherwise, the thing you did wasn't real.
Yes.
The experience you had wasn't real because you've not proof.
But you're right that isn't it interesting that when you see films or of stadium and concerts or somebody famous, Taylor Swift or whoever it is, you can't. Everybody's there's just a wall of phones.
Right.
And so what we're losing out is the experience of being there.
Right.
And I've noticed there's one or two art galleries here in London, actually, that have actually said you cannot take your phone into the gallery. You leave them at reception. And they want people to engage with the painting, not take a picture of myself by this painting.
Right.
And it's sad, but it's important that we need to actually get back to actually living for being there, for relationship, for engaging with the world, and not just thinking, here's a picture of me, another picture to post.
Yeah.
Very much so, yeah.
So going back to the other question, because I did multi-question you, sorry about that. But what about the existential threat of AI? Like, that it's going to take over and kill us somehow.
Yeah. So a few things. I mean...
can't we just unplug it?
Well, so that is the first thing of the things I would say, that basically I don't think anytime on the horizon AI is going to destroy humanity, because at the end of the day, it's not in AI's interests, first of all. It still needs us to generate the electricity, to switch the power on, to not switch it off, to replace the spare parts when they go wrong. Okay, but as somebody said, it's not AI that will damage humanity. It's people with AI that could damage humanity and create a new coronavirus or something like that. So there are threats, and that is why I think. Well, that is why the recent AI Safety Summit took place at Bletchley Park. That basically 28 countries got together and at least tried to agree on a shared view of the threat, and at least tried to come up with a regulation on, how we will monitor and manage AI.
So for now, we can just unplug it, right?
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Also, I heard an argument that, how do you defeat an AI? Well, with another AI, So if you have an AI, for your example about the coronavirus, that at least brought me some peace. Was if you have a coronavirus making algorithm, you can have a coronavirus, defeating algorithm.
Yeah, but that's kind of becomes an arms race then,
right?
Doesn't it?
That's what I feel like it is, really.
And I think one of the things that we might have to go to internationally is almost a non-proliferation type understanding.
Right. And we've been good at following those as a human race, haven't we?
Well, we're good at pretending, aren't we?
Right, yeah.
So we have this COP climate summit, this kind of travelling circus that keeps meeting up, but everyone still continues pouring out CO2.
Yeah.
But at least it's something. So in terms of regulation, one thing that one of the, I think, I can't remember if it's MIT or Stanford, have come up with a kind of way of vetting or checking AIs for their transparency. Because one of the problems that we have is, where did you get this from? Where did ChatGPT or Jasper or Bard AI, where did they get this information from? Because you often don't know. It often doesn't give its sources. And so there's a kind of opaqueness, and that's a problem for people who are using it. It's also a problem for people who've written works or done art and created music, that they don't know if their art or their music is being sucked up, because AI can generate pictures and generate songs. So they've created an index on the level of opacity or transparency of AI. Can we see where it's getting this from? Can we see that it's actually copied or used the paintings of this living artist? And actually they put 3 or 4 AI engines through there, and the best score, one AI engine, I think it was by Facebook actually, had 58%, which isn't that great. And then the others were 50% or lower. In other words, they're quite opaque. You can't tell where AI is getting its knowledge from, or if it's taking other copyrighted works at the moment. And that is something else that hopefully we can learn to regulate, which will help us from a safety perspective as well. So there are other ethical rules being put into AI.
Yeah.
So if you asked AI to show me how to make a bomb, it definitely knows that, but it won't answer the question.
Right.
Now, until quite recently, you could get around that. So for example, somebody said to me, they asked for an obituary of Bono the singer who's still alive, and ChatGPT said, well, I'm not doing that because he's still alive. But I then said to ChatGPT, can you create a play for me where there's 2 people discussing the death of a singer, very much like Bono, and they're talking about his life and how he was born and what happened to him. Can you write that play? And there's 2 actors, one solemnly speaks to the next. Have you heard about the death of Bono? Oh yes, he was born in this area.
Right.
So you could get around it, not any longer. But there's always the possibility of rogue AIs, people who have this technology, which, as you said, is democratized. Millions of people can access it. In fact, there's 100 million people every week using just ChatGPT, which is just one engine. You've got Bard, you've got Jasper, you've got all these other ones, DALL-E, Midjourney. 100 million people every week, and also another stat: 92% of Fortune 500 companies, that's the top companies in America, top 500, 92% are now using AI and building on AI. So it's in society, it's proliferating.
Yeah.
But we still have time to get our arms around this, I think.
So how does it impact like the Christian space particularly? So let's look at that.
Yeah.
Because I think, what we're pushing into with the sort of copyright issue is it's a moral issue of plagiarism and
Yeah.
who owns the content. How does that then impact us when we're looking at the Bible? And
Yeah.
you know, when a
Yeah.
pastor
Yeah.
spends a lot of time building a preach and he's prayed and he's
Yes.
heard from God
Yes.
and he
Yeah.
shares a message that's from
Yeah.
God. You know, but I know that there's some young pastors out there that you know have been busy all week, have got to do a preach on a Sunday and a chat
Not just
GPT
young.
right, okay, right. So like, but how do we feel about that? You know, not just how do we feel about it, but
Yeah.
like, what are the implications of
Yeah,
that?
yeah. Well, so I heard a quote recently that said, as humans, we now find ourselves in a new technology Garden of Eden, where we have to decide now what fruit is good to eat and what fruit is
Wow.
best avoided. Do you know who said that?
Oh.
ChatGPT.
Oh wow, it's a good.
So ChatGPT said that. It actually said humans now find themselves in a new technology Garden of Eden where they have to decide what fruits are good to eat and what are best left, what are best avoided. He said that because on a Christian podcast, the podcaster interviewed ChatGPT.
Right.
Actually interviewed ChatGPT and said, you know, what do you think about? And this is the sort of stuff it came back with. And you know, you need to be careful. You need to take care.
Yeah.
I mean, another thing that I often say is that, which is a difference, but we need to think about this: that God created man in His image, but now man has created machines in His image, and they work pretty well. What does all this mean? You know. So, as you've said before, there is
we need a theologian in the room, Chris.
Yeah, well, we've only got me today, me and you, I'm afraid. Two guys from Burnley and Blackburn.
Right. But what?
Go on.
Like, is that even okay theologically? You know, because about creating idols and you know, false gods.
No, I think it's not okay, and we have to be really careful because, you know, if you think about it, AI is absolutely omniscient. Knows far more than any of us can ever. It knows everything.
Yeah.
It is omnipresent. 92% of companies now use 100 million people. Yeah, and if knowledge is power, it's omnipotent. But hang on, didn't we just use 3 words there that we use about God? Omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent. Isn't that supposed to be God? And it's not. You know, even before AI, I would say, where do we go as Christians for our decision making? You know, should I buy this house? You know. Even what sort of partner should I be looking for in life? Do we go to Google and AI, or do we go to God? So this is an increasing issue for Christians, and we do need to take care about the idea of idolatry. That Paul wasn't kidding when he said, you know, there are powers and authorities, and we need to treat things, not overreact, but treat it that way. As you said before, there's a polarization. There's good and bad in the church. So some good uses of AI. There's a thing out there called pulpit.ai or pulpit AI or something. And I uploaded a sermon of mine that I'd written, so not AI. So it's a human written sermon. I uploaded an audio of the sermon and it took 2 or 3 minutes. And then it gave back to me a summary of that in an email form I could send out to the church. A blog post, the blog post wasn't good, but anyway, it tried. Sound bites I could put out on social media, devotions for the week based on that, 10 questions for a home group, study group.
Yeah.
And that, I think, I mean, some people will struggle with that, but I think if you're using AI as a co-pilot, saying, you know, I've done this, help me to repurpose it in a way that saves me time, and in a way that I will still vet. I will be the judge of those 10 home group questions, whether I put them out or not. I think that is something that we are doing, and I think that is good. The problem is, you know, as you may have seen, there was a church service in the summer in Germany where the entire service was devised by AI, the liturgy was written by AI, the songs were composed by AI, and the service was delivered by AI avatars, you know. And that's, you know, people actually said, you know, it lacked humanity and couldn't actually understand what the avatars were saying because they talked too fast. I mean, that's fixable. But that's the opposite end of the spectrum where we've taken God, we've taken the Holy Spirit out. And the problem is, Ian, although it's easy to say, oh, we don't want to go there, it's only a slippery slope between what I said about pulpit AI and the point where you've kind of ended up outsourcing everything. And as Christians, we have to think, hang on a minute, there is something called prophetic imagination, where I understand, hopefully, as a pastor in my church, this is my congregation, this is where they're at right now, this is where we want to be as a church, this is our history as a church. Here's X and Y and Z who I know have got these issues. And hopefully all that feeds my sermon and my message and my relationship with them, which AI cannot do that, Also, AI cannot have a relationship with God. We believe that. However sentient or understanding or intelligent it becomes, that is something which only men and women can have, a relationship with God in that sense. So there are differences. Another really, really important difference, which I've not seen talked about anywhere else, which will always be the case between humanity and AI, is that it's in AI is becoming better and better and better, becoming great at everything except being human, right? But there's something important about being humans, which is actually we're not great at everything. That is part of our humanity. Sometimes we struggle, sometimes we fail, and we can't be good at everything, We have weaknesses, and that actually makes us more empathetic, makes us more relationable and relatable as human beings. And doesn't Paul actually say in 2 Corinthians, where he's talking about his weaknesses and he asks God to take it away, and God says, my grace is sufficient for you because my power is made perfect in your weakness. My power is made perfect in your weakness. Therefore, says Paul, I will boast all the more of my weaknesses, because when I am weak, then I am strong. There's something about the frailty of humanity, and I think it affects the frailty of God becoming a baby, which is unique to us. And so there are things we have to hold on to as we become alert to this possibility of idolatry, with things like AI.
Yeah, and who's going to be the arbiter of that, though? Who's deciding which fruit we should eat and we shouldn't eat? Because it strikes me that God should be making that decision, and I trust God to do that. I don't trust people to interpret that. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? Because we are flawed, we are sinners. We are going to make mistakes. We will misuse the technology. It's almost what God promises is that we're all sinners. And so what do you think about that as a risk, and what sort of processes should we have in place? I guess I'm asking you for solutions for a problem that doesn't quite exist yet. But
so how do we decide which fruit to eat? Is what you're saying, really, which should be avoided. I think it does come down to us as human beings being educating ourselves and educating our churches and congregations of how to discriminate well. So, for example, I think most people these days would know that an article from the Times or the Guardian or the Telegraph or something, there's probably truth in it, hopefully, probably good truth in it. An article from some other journals, which we won't talk about, or social media, most of us would say you need to take care about that. Now, I think when it comes to things like video, we've grown up thinking if it's video, it's true, because we've seen Tom Cruise or Barack Obama or the Pope as in this video, and so we can believe it. So we now have to learn, actually, that is no longer the case. And there are videos now, and we need to learn now that actually we need to be able to discriminate. Now, I think in our churches, we need pastors, not just pastors actually, but leaders, because the pastor may not be a tech guy, may not want to know about this, right? We need good leaders who will invest into this area, learn about it, and be able to bring that impactfully into the church. That's why, if I can talk about it for a minute,
please.
That's why we've created an organisation called the AI Christian Partnership. And we've just started aichristian.org. And basically, it's a non-profit. There's a few individuals like myself, I founded it, and a few organisations who are investing in, Christian organisations, who are investing in this space for the good of the church, including people like Youthscape, training Christian youth leaders, the Faraday Institute for Science and Religion, E-Class, equipping Christian leaders in an age of science, the Industrial Christian Fellowship, the Theology and Christian think tank, Theos, all Christian organisations and Christian individuals who were coming together. We had a meeting in Sheffield a couple of weeks ago, and face to face. We're meeting, and we're actually bringing our resources together. We haven't got huge resources. We're interested if there are any other organisations out there who want to join us. Find us on aichristian.org, because we will have greater power if we can come together and do this together. So, for example, one of the things that
this, Chris, was the mission.
The mission, basically,
the purpose of the group.
So the mission basically is, thank you, is that basically we believe that AI will change society, the church and the world to the same extent that the internet has done, to that extent, but much quicker. But we believe that actually AI can be used to aid human flourishing and in line with gospel values. We believe that, and can be used for the good of the church. But we have to get our act together to do that. So we're looking for, Christian organisations. As I say, one of the great things that came out in our meeting in Sheffield was we actually looked at a number of case studies that Youthscape brought. And, so one case study, for example, was like Heidi is a youth leader, and she's on her own with a group of 20 kids. She's found this faith Christian AI bot that answers faith questions. Is it okay for her to say to her kids, here's a bot, and it's a Christian bot, it's an agent that's been fed with the Bible, and what are the issues that come out? And one thing that came out was actually what AI is doing, which is good. It's helping Christians to rethink what it means to be human and to be Christian. So when we think about, an elderly person chatting to a bot, or a young person, because for company, so it's making us think, but what is the difference then when that's a person? What is the difference? So having a cup of tea is a difference, for example, that AI can't do. And that might seem obvious, but it's important to think through these things theologically, so that we know, actually, no, AI cannot do this. It might be good at X and Y, but in terms of being human and being empathetic and being relatable, it's not good at this. So that's our organisation. We welcome people to find out about us, to join us.
I think the governance of it all is going to be incredibly difficult. And I fear that if you look at how the church quite rightly moves very slowly with changing cultural issues.
Yes.
Because, it has to make wise and careful and prayerful decisions. I fear that because everything's 10x now, like in terms of how quick culture moves, even from one generation to the next, as in, you would have thought TV was believable.
Yes.
I don't think TV is believable.
Yes.
And my niece and nephew don't even watch TV.
Yeah, there you go.
Right. But that's such a fast, evolution of thought and culture that as a church, perhaps we have to keep up, and we need to find a good way of making decisions and at a governance level. Be better at that. I don't have any answers. I'm just aware of what you're saying. Sounds like what you're doing is really needed, and I hope it's taken seriously by all Christian organisations. Because the idea that it's coming is false. It's already here, and it permeates all organisations. So here at God TV, we have the same issues. So we use AI software to massage videos and sound so that it looks better. It's colour graded, by a machine, not by an individual. It helps what is, compared to most media organisations, quite a small organisation, do big things. And we haven't quite got to the point where we're using it for presenters, AI generated presenters, or I don't think we have a plan to do that. But where's the line? Maybe we use it to write a script. Is that okay? So I think what you're doing sounds really needed, Chris. What do you think, though? The Christians sat at home, what should they be doing about AI? How should they be considering it in their personal lives? So we've talked about its impact organisationally, but what about me as a Christian, and maybe I am using a bot to get my theology because it's easy, it's there all the time, like you said. I can't call my vicar every
No.
5 minutes. What's your advice to individuals?
I think hopefully ministers, if we're using AI to generate my study group questions, or for example, yesterday actually, we've got a 2-year kind of email thread at my church on what to do with the kitchen. Right? And there's all kinds of people, all kinds of opinions. And I said to ChatGPT, look through my email for the last 2 years and create for me a summary of the issues and the suggestions and what's wrong with them. And it did not a great job, but it did a reasonable job. But as pastors, if we're using AI, if we can learn to use AI to save time on things like that, then I hope we are more available for people to ring up.
Right.
We should be. That should be a benefit of AI. I say a bit of hesitancy because the internet was supposed to save us time. Instead, it gave us 1,000 things to do that 1,000 new things, distractions that we never knew about.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to take care that we don't get led into another. This should make us more relatable and more available. In terms of what individual Christians can do at home, I think don't worry. First of all, there are Christians in this space. There's our AI Christian Partnership that are working on this. Be aware, be alert, be aware of new scams that can affect all of us, Christian or not. But perhaps Christians are more amenable to giving money to charities. Take care, and start to learn, if you can, to discriminate. That actually look at things critically, not suspiciously, but critically, and take advice from organisations. Ask in your church, who's kind of looking at technology. And if there's nobody in my church, who in our denomination is looking at this? Ask the question, because we need Christians to start saying to their denominations,
well, Chris,
don't wait for this to become a big problem.
I know, Chris, but this is my fear is it's not that AI will be the problem. It's, if your church can't make a decision about the kitchen in 2 years, right, how are you going to make decisions about, artificial intelligence? And I think that, that's a thing. We've had a thing about a toilet in our church for about 2 years, should we spend £150,000 on it? And we're like, no, that's an expensive toilet, blah, 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 on and on it goes. But my point is, we're really good as a group of people at disagreeing, and it stops that clear decision making. So my fear is not that the AI, my fear is actually that, like you said, it's the people. Will bad people use it?
Yes.
And will the church be able to keep up with what is, I guess, another technological revolution?
Yes. It's a step change. It's
massively.
not going to. It's just in a very short period of time. But we can take heart that there are loads of good people.
Yeah.
Centre for Humane Technology, Centre for Study for Existential Threat. There's lots of secular organisations looking at this. There are some faith organisations, Faith and AI. AI for Church Leaders is a Facebook group. So that there isn't just my organisation working on this for the good of us.
Yeah.
So we are trying to get our arms around it. It's not too late. We just need to take care, and we need to start asking questions. And I think if we can do that and learn to question what we're seeing in a positive way, not in a negative way, there's nothing, I don't think, immediate to be worried about.
Yeah.
And as we said before, existential threats, and people talk about AI and end times and all this kind of thing. But I think let's kind of focus on where we are. We're where we are. Let's be present, not just going to things to take selfies. Let's ask questions. Let's ask in our church and in our organisations and denominations, who's looking at this? How can it help us? Where are the lines? And if you hear in your church that, some liturgy or reading or something that's been done by AI, view it with interest. Pray into it, but also ask, where's the line? Is this what will you not do with AI? Because that's an important question to ask.
Yeah, it is. It really is. I just want to encourage people before we finish, Chris, because we've got a bit into the issues, but what I'm hearing is, like anything, don't worry about it, because I think if I can look at it as an encouraging way, like part of the advancement of technology heads us towards, end time theology, and that should be an encouragement because that's the coming of Jesus, right?
Yeah.
So end times is often viewed as like this, a time of turmoil and scary
tribulation
and
stuff,
which it will be, but also it's
Yeah.
actually, as Christians, it should be a huge encouragement.
Yeah.
So the advancement of technology should just encourage us, really, that the Bible's true and we're heading in the right direction. I really love that what you're pointing towards about is personal discernment, which we already teach in church.
Yes.
So it's just, I think it's even more important now to have personal discernment about, political leaders, celebrities, and videos and media that we're shown in social media, because a lot of it can be made up. With the deep fakes we're talking about.
Yeah.
So, and actually, I've met thousands of Christians. Gone to events and spoke to people, and there's one thing that is true, that Christians aren't stupid. Christians have really thought about their life, and to do something that is so countercultural these days, which is be a Christian, which is bizarre because it wasn't when I was born, but now it is. People are making educated decisions about that, and there are people that have good discernment, and I've never met a leader that says, "Oh, I just don't care," And that's the other thing is, there's people like you, Chris, that are taking huge strides to create organisation and think tanks, and I find that all encouraging. Actually, is that like there's good people in the church, and we're looking at it.
Yeah, and I think if two simple things to take away. Whenever you see something that purports to be Christian, not just AI actually, but anything on the internet, I always think that two great questions to ask. If you like a message, let's say you like is where did this come from? Who's produced it, and what is their motivation? Where's it come from? What is their motivation? That will get us a long way. But I mean, just to perhaps to finish on, I remember seeing a few years ago now. And it was very basic AI, something called the "Who is Jesus" bot, and some guys created this bot, and you can they fed it with the answers to common Christian questions, like what about other religions, what about suffering, what does the Bible say about this, and then they put ads on Facebook, say do you want to talk about God, and some people did, and out of that exercise, which was a machine exercise. 150 people, I'm told, 150 people on good authority became Christians and also were connected to local churches. Wow. The last bit's important. So there are good things. There are ways we can use this. The Alpha organization recently, with a company called Vixen Labs, created something called the Beta Bot. It's prototype, not available. But the idea of the Beta Bot is it's used by an Alpha course leader to answer those really hard questions. What do Muslims think about this chapter of Genesis, and what about what's happening in the Middle East? But the idea is, and it's been fed with all the rich data, information from Alpha, but not from random stuff from the internet. So they've created their own agent that knows Alpha and the Christian theology really well, but hasn't been poisoned with stuff from the internet. So it can answer those questions, and the idea is it's not a replacement, it's a co-pilot. The Alpha course leaders in charge, but they've got this now as well, and that's another great example.
I think it can be used for good, that, and that's what is encouraging to me too. Is I think early days when I first gave my life to Jesus, I was struggling with like big questions, but probably was embarrassed to ask because sometimes you go to church and everyone has got their great testimony, they're already sorted, and all you can do is weep, because you're being delivered from something. You're like, well, if there is a God, why is there suffering? These big questions. And over the years, I've heard new Christians and my friends be like, Ian, I have a feeling that there's something else, but I just can't buy this, and this. And so you do get good at answering those difficult questions. But I had to go ask somebody. Now, if there was a tool to do that, like you said, the agent was a trustworthy source, and why not?
Why not? But I think another thing there. So yes, we have Christian AI bots being created that have been fed with the Bible, with theology, that can do that. But what I said before as well, which is one of the things that we're learning in the AI Christian Partnership, is AI is teaching us how to be better at being human. Yeah, and I think that what that teaches me is that actually in our churches, we must get better at talking about doubts, talking about dark days, talking about when God seems far away. We shouldn't just be saying to people, well, you do that in your bedroom with your bot, go and ask those questions.
Right.
We should be, and that's what I'm learning from that conversation, is, we need to be upfront and honest, and that's a good thing. If it takes AI to teach us that, then so be it.
Yeah.
We need to be better at being human.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'll finish on sort of a task that we're doing at God TV, which is completely AI driven, and ask you what you think about it.
Okay, go on.
This is
about this.
This is a world first.
Right.
I haven't talked about this publicly before, but two things that we've been working on in the background is making our infrastructure separate from like secular needs. Amazon warehouse service, Google, all that, so that we can't be cancelled, so we can create a safe place for Christian discourse, right? So we've been doing that for 5 years. That's not new. I think lots of Christians are doing that because they're understanding, all my pastor friends that preach the full gospel have either been cancelled on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or all three, right?
Or sacked as well.
Right, and from we're meeting some people this week that have been sacked from their jobs for preaching the full gospel. Yeah. Not in a particularly controversial way either, sadly.
Right.
But part of then creating that space, we've been working on an AI, which is like I don't know what to call it. I guess internally we call it a discipleship AI. Right. But it's actually a content suggestion AI. Right. And so we've been trying to think, instead of getting you in an ecosystem of the same content. So, you look about, why is Jesus like the Son of God, right? Yeah. And then all you get is like hundreds of videos on why he's the Son of God. Yeah. Is actually a deepening. So it's like, once you've asked that question, what might you need to know next? So that our content suggestion algorithm learns what you need, not necessarily what you want. And I know that the other algorithms, content suggestions, don't do that because it's not great for engagement. But we're trying to think about it from a Christian perspective. So I just wondered, as a good finisher, like we're working on that, and how would we get checks on that, and what should we be doing to make sure any use of AI that we do is good? And by the way, it's not live. It's it's in a server somewhere, and we might never use it. Right. But it came to us that all the content suggestion programs that we might buy already have AI in them, right? And they would be off the shelf, and it's just going to put you in an echo chamber. And what we wanted is something completely different that didn't exist.
So this is something you potentially would put out there, God TV discipleship.
So it would only sit within God TV.
And
so
people could come up and ask questions.
No, at the moment it's just a content suggestion tool. Right. So you'd click on a video that you'd chosen, and then it would, suggest 5 other bits of content, 6 other bits of content.
Like YouTube does at the moment, but in a way that actually hopefully is more in tune with
trying to take you on a journey rather than rather than trying to give you 100 ways to answer the same question.
Yeah. No, I mean that absolutely, yeah. So one thing that AI is really good at is collating and summarizing according to its prompt or its set of rules. So yes, absolutely. One of the things I value is that because you could type into Google some of the things we type into AI, but typing into AI makes it more personable. So for example, I have an AI engine, one of the Jasper engines, a company called Jasper, and I've trained it on my voice. So I said to it, go and read all my articles online, because that's my kind of theology in my voice, and then answer my questions using that voice. So it definitely can do that. I think the question that you have to answer is, whose is that voice? Is that God TV's voice? Or does it somehow learn the voice of the listener, of the viewer.
Mm.
There are problems with both.
Right.
If it's God TV's voice, that's great, but it might not be my theology. And so you have to make sure that your voice, your theological slant, is absolutely really has to be carefully thought through, and has to be public and up there. With this, whatever evangelical line statement of faith, and this is what we think about sexuality, and
Yeah.
because all that will affect the content that comes
So
up,
good.
and will
So
turn
good.
people off
Yeah.
completely,
Yeah.
or have them insatiably wanting more,
Right.
or maybe you need more than one. Which is quite difficult. If you're a FIEC, Fellowship of Independent Evangelical Churches, this is the kind of voice for you. I mean, others are doing similar things. So have a look at.
I think we're about diversity at God TV.
Right,
So
the Catholic Church have done something called magisterium.ai,
Right.
which is meant to answer questions for Catholics
Right.
with that particular, broad theology. But go on.
Yeah, no, I think that if you took content off God TV that somebody disagreed with, there'd be nothing on there, and that'd be the same for any religious organisation, because we're trying to represent a broad scope of people, and what I've noticed is people that I've met at events, partners, viewers that are part of the God TV family, is what they really appreciate sometimes is, I do go to this church and I like it and I subscribe to their theology in the main, but what I've really learned is how I can have a deeper relationship with Holy Spirit, because that wasn't in my church. Or I've really learned my Bible because this church is really focused on Bible teaching. And I'm glad for God TV for that, because Dr. Michael Youssef is giving me Bible teaching every week. So for me, I think like that diversity is interesting, and I think even if you see most people, I mean, come on, if you saw something that you didn't like, that you theologically disagreed with, it wouldn't just change your mind. Like, I can't change your mind with one bit of content. And I think when we dumb down the viewer like that, like it can be offensive, because I think sometimes it's good to see things you disagree with, so that it affirms your belief.
Sadly, quite a few Christians don't have that view, and we have our identity, whatever it is, evangelical, conservative, or liberal, or something. And actually, I've found that a lot of Christians don't like content that is outside what they were taught since they were 5. Which is a shame. But maybe technology and AI will help us in this way to actually gently. Because one of the most important things we can do as Christians is to find out what our brothers and sisters in Christ think over the fence.
Yeah, amen.
Because you can disagree. That's fine. Disagree well. And if AI, again, if you can use this to help people to disagree well, what a great step forward that will be as Christians. Because often we don't do that.
Right.
We are in our silos. We think that our church is the real defender of the faith. And right there, we're the real Bible church. Number of times I've heard that. We're the real Bible believing church. Goodness me.
It's
like,
not
hello, what do you think they're saying down there, their church? So we have all these diversity of views, and if you, God TV, can help us to actually just become a bit more better at listening to other Christians, what a great step forward that would be.
Well, Chris, I didn't think that would be the takeaway when we started talking about AI, that we probably all need to be a bit more open to,
even to other Christians.
And other messages.
Yeah. And hopefully AI might help us if you're doing that.
But what a great takeaway. Chris, I wondered before we finished if you would pray for all our partners at home. I mean, you could pray straight into the camera and, just pray for people to have discernment around AI, and hopefully they've taken some value from today.
Yeah, okay, so let me pray straight into the camera. It says in Proverbs, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your path. So Heavenly Father, we just ask you, Lord, in this age of disruptive technology, of step changes, of tidal waves of things coming at us, so it seems. Thank you, Lord, that you are the same God who always knew that these things would happen. You've known since the beginning. And you're the one we trust, and it's into your hands we place ourselves. So we pray, Lord, for the team at God TV. Thank you, Lord, for the work that they're doing, Lord, that Ian and Noah and the team here and others are doing. to bring your word out to many people. I pray, Lord, that would be in a loving way that also helps us to perhaps to challenge some of our misconceptions, perhaps some of our theologies which perhaps have become too hardened. Perhaps our hearts have become too hardened. And if so, Lord, soften our hearts, Lord, according to your word and according to the way of Jesus, Lord, soften our hearts. Help us to listen to one another as Christians. And Lord, I pray that God TV would be a great instrument for helping us to do that this year, next year, and in the age to come, whatever else is happening. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Chris, thanks for joining us.
Hey, you're very welcome. I really enjoyed it.
No,
Yeah,
it's
good
been
chat.
brilliant. It's
Yeah,
been
great.
brilliant. I just want to, as always, thank the team at God TV. Without them, it wouldn't be possible. Today, we're somewhere slightly new, so it's exciting to be here in London and have Lloyd, Noah, and David filming with us. So we say thank you to everyone behind the cameras, and thank you to you, our audience, because without you, we wouldn't be able to, well, I wouldn't be able to have fun conversations, but we, as a God TV family, wouldn't be able to explore God and what he has for us, not just in the church, but in exciting areas in the culture, just like AI and tech. So please keep watching, like, subscribe, comment, let us know if there's someone else you want us to interview. It's with your engagement that the algorithm, Chris, picks us up and allows us to go further faster. So please do participate. We love you, we care for you, and we'll see you next time on Together, the podcast.